Imagine you're a commercial pilot, okay? You're cruising at, say, 30,000 feet, and it is just pitch black night outside.
Right.
Suddenly, this glowing 4-square-kilometer orb of pure pulsating energy just phases right through your windshield.
Oh, man.
It completely shorts out every single instrument on your dash, hovers in the cabin for a split second, and then just shoots through the ceiling at like over 100,000 kilometers an hour.
Which is terrifying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You probably think you were under some kind of alien attack.
Yeah.
But what if that glowing orb wasn't a spaceship at all? What if it was actually a hungry, living animal?
I mean, it completely shatters the whole metallic spaceship framework we've all been handed, by decades of science fiction.
Right, the little green men and the flying saucers.
Exactly. When we look at that unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs, we tend to project our own human engineering onto them. We build machines to fly, so we just assume anything flying up there must be a machine piloted by biological creatures. But the data we are looking at today suggests something vastly stranger.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking this massive 109-page scientific paper published in the Journal of Modern Physics, along with some really incredibly detailed analysis from 2 YouTube channels, Bioluminescence and The Fifth Pillar of Emphasis.
Both really great sources.
Yeah, and the central mind-bending premise across all of these sources is that the UAPs zipping around our skies and even our oceans are actually a fourth domain of life. They are conscious entities made entirely of plasma.
And we are going to strictly follow the scientific and historical data laid out in these sources today. Because once you put on this very specific analytical lens, you suddenly have a physics-based explanation for, well, almost every erratic UAP behavior.
It's wild how much it explains.
It really is. It explains why they swarm around thunderstorms, why they dive into oceans, why they routinely trigger security breaches at nuclear weapons facilities, and how they actually interact with the human brain.
But before we get to, glowing orbs chasing fighter jets, I need to ground this, because when I hear the word plasma, I just picture pure energy, like neon lights or fire or, I don't know, the surface of the sun. The paper specifically focuses on something called dusty plasmas, acting alive in laboratory settings.
Right.
Wait, dusty plasma. How does dust get involved with pure energy?
It is a really great place to start, actually, because 99% of the observable universe is made of plasma. It is just ionized gas, basically a soup of freely roaming electrons and ions.
Okay, a highly charged soup.
Exactly. But space isn't empty, right? It's full of fine particulate matter, essentially microscopic dust. And in a laboratory vacuum chamber, when scientists inject this dust into a highly charged plasma field, something pretty wild happens.
What happens?
Under certain frequencies, the particles don't just fly around randomly. They get trapped in the plasma and they actually self-organize.
Wait, self-organize how? Like, without a physical container?
Yes, without any physical walls at all. The charged particles naturally lock into these stable geometric lattice structures. They form these distinct cohesive entities that researchers call plasmoids.
Okay, plasmoids.
And the absolute shock for scientists observing these dusty plasmas is that they perfectly mimic biological life.
Like, how so?
Well, they efficiently manage energy within their boundaries, cycling electrical charges in a way that looks exactly like a metabolic process.
Hang on, if it's just a floating cloud of charged gas and dust, how does it have a metabolism? It doesn't have a stomach, it doesn't have a cell wall to process nutrients.
Well, the Journal of Modern Physics points out that these plasmoids naturally form internal voids. Imagine a hollow center surrounded by thick layers of highly charged rotating particles.
So it's like a bubble.
A very energetic bubble, yeah.
Yeah.
Those internal voids act as perfectly isolated chemical chambers. The electromagnetic fields inside are so intense that they can trap other microscopic particles and actually force them to interact.
Oh, wow. So it's like each of these microscopic plasma voids is a tiny floating pressure cooker. It grabs random space dust, applies this intense electromagnetic heat and pressure, and just cooks it.
That is a perfect analogy. It is a localized, high-energy, prebiotic reactor. And the sources explicitly connect this to the famous Miller-Urey experiment from the 1950s.
Remind me, that's the one where they simulated the early Earth's atmosphere, right?
Correct. They took water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, and they fired electrical sparks through it to simulate lightning.
Lightning, which is a plasma.
Exactly, a natural plasma. And that electrical interaction created amino acids, the basic building blocks of life. The internal voids of a plasmoid act as a miniature, naturally occurring version of that exact lab setup. They facilitate complex chemical reactions that might even form RNA-like polymers.
Which raises an enormous question for me. If these plasmoids are out there in the vacuum of space, acting as these chemical pressure cookers, creating amino acids, and they eventually crash into a planet. I mean, the sources mentioned panspermia, right?
Yeah.
The idea that life is seeded across the cosmos by comets or meteorites. Could these microscopic plasma entities be the things actually doing the seeding?
That is exactly the implication. If they can self-organize from inorganic dust and jumpstart the creation of biological building blocks, they might literally be the bridge between physics and biology.
Okay, but if these things are replicating and acting like dividing cells in a tiny vacuum chamber, what happens on a macro level? Because if they are out in space, do they just burn up when they hit Earth's atmosphere?
They actually don't burn up, and to see them on a macro scale, the sources rely heavily on NASA space shuttle films, specifically missions STS-101 and STS-115. These cameras captured entities in the thermosphere, which is about 250 kilometers above the Earth. And up there, we aren't talking about microscopic dots anymore. The footage shows self-illuminating, pulsating plasmas ranging from 0.1 to 4 square kilometers in size.
Wait, I'm sorry, 4 square kilometers. That is the size of a small town, just like floating in the upper atmosphere.
Yeah, and moving at velocities that completely shatter our human engineering constraints. The quantitative analysis of the NASA films clocks these plasmoids traveling at speeds up to 35.6 kilometers per second.
Per second.
Yes, which translates to over 100,000 kilometers per hour.
And the paper talks about them making abrupt 90-degree or even 163-degree turns at those speeds. If you put a human pilot or even a solid drone made of solid titanium through a turn like that at 100,000 kilometers an hour, the G-forces would turn the metal into shrapnel.
Absolutely. But a plasmoid has virtually zero mass compared to a solid craft. It doesn't suffer from the same constraints of inertia. Furthermore, because they aren't rigid, they are highly adaptable shapeshifters.
Meaning what? They change form.
Exactly. The NASA films show them transitioning from spheres and glowing disks into cylinders, rings, and even these intricate jellyfish shapes. They also replicate on a massive scale, dropping smaller satellite plasmas or merging back together.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here, because this is where my skepticism flares up just a bit. Are we absolutely sure we aren't just looking at random electromagnetic push-pull reactions?
How do you mean?
Like, if you throw two powerful magnets on a table, they immediately snap together or they violently repel. In a highly charged environment like the thermosphere, couldn't this just be dumb particles reacting to magnetic fields?
It's a fair question, and the authors of the Journal of Modern Physics paper address that directly. It is true that some movement is driven by basic charge coupling, positive attracts negative.
Right.
But the NASA footage shows behaviors that defy simple automata-like physics. We see complex hunting and targeting behaviors.
What does a plasma hunt even look like?
Well, imagine a hypervelocity plasmoid streaking across the screen. Suddenly, it strikes another one. Instead of just bouncing off or merging like dumb magnets, a third plasmoid materializes, fundamentally changes its shape, alters its trajectory to intercept the first one, shadows its movements, intersects the exact same targets, and then stops to hover.
Wow.
They don't just snap together, they pursue, they react to evasive maneuvers, and they appear deeply mutually aware of one another.
Okay, wow. So it's less like iron filings jumping to a magnet and more like a predator chasing prey or a highly coordinated flock of birds navigating a threat together.
Exactly. The complexity of those interactions leads researchers to suspect purposeful behavior. It looks like a living ecosystem operating in the upper atmosphere.
Okay, so we have 4 square kilometer flocks of energy birds flying around the thermosphere.
Right.
But how does that affect us? It's easy to look at footage from 250 kilometers up and say, wow, space is weird, and just go about your day. But the sources show these entities actively descend into our airspace.
They do. And to understand why they come down into our airspace, you really just have to look at what any living system needs to survive.
Energy.
Exactly, energy. The Earth operates on a global electric circuit, and it is largely driven by thunderstorms. A severe thunderstorm acts like a colossal battery, pumping massive amounts of positive electrical current up into the ionosphere. These plasmoids, which typically carry negative or neutral charges, are magnetically drawn to that massive energy source.
Oh, man. Think about the last time you watched a severe thunderstorm from your porch. You're watching the lightning strikes. But according to this data, you might also be watching a feeding frenzy.
You really might be.
The sources detail shuttle footage showing hundreds of these brightly glowing plasmoids congregating right over lightning storms, just soaking up the electrical currents.
It is foraging behavior. And they don't just feed on atmospheric weather. They are deeply attracted to the oceans, too.
Why the ocean? Water conducts electricity, sure.
Hmm?
But what's drawing UAP out of the sky to actually dive into the water?
It actually comes down to friction.
Friction.
Yeah. During turbulent whitewater conditions, when massive waves are violently crashing and churning, the physical friction of that water violently shears electrons away. That massive shearing generates a huge positive static charge right on the surface of the ocean.
Oh, I see.
So to a negatively charged plasmoid in the lower atmosphere, that turbulent white water suddenly turns into a giant electromagnet, just pulling it down.
That perfectly explains the endless U.S. Navy sightings. And oh, you know that U.S. Customs and Border Protection footage that leaked a while back?
Oh, yeah, the one showing the UAP flying erratically just above the ocean.
Yes, it's shape-shifting, and then it dives straight into the water without making a splash. And that makes sense now, because it's not a solid hunk of metal. Hitting the water at high speeds doesn't destroy it. It just phases right in.
Exactly. But it's not just natural phenomena they feed on. This brings us to the most critical intersection with human activity. Plasmoids are fundamentally drawn to intense man-made electromagnetic and nuclear energy.
This is the part of the deep dive that gave me genuine chills.
I don't blame you. They routinely seek out nuclear-powered naval aircraft carriers. They have been repeatedly sighted over nuclear weapons facilities, nuclear power plants like Fukushima, and historically over atomic sites like Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
And didn't the sources also mention them showing up around crop circles?
Yes, actually. We've seen reports of these orbs hovering over crop circles, which researchers suspect might be tied to localized electromagnetic anomalies in the Earth. It essentially draws these plasmoids down to the surface in agricultural areas.
Okay, but if they are swarming highly sensitive nuclear weapons facilities, it forces a massive question. Is this evidence of an intelligence-gathering mission? Like, are they probing our military defenses? Or is a nuclear reactor just the electromagnetic equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet for a hungry animal?
Well, if you view them through the traditional lens of a metallic alien spaceship, you automatically assume it's a reconnaissance mission. It feels like a threat.
Right, naturally.
But if you view them through the lens of plasma biology, it's just foraging. A nuclear reactor is leaking dense, highly concentrated energy. It's a moth drawn to a spectacularly bright flame. They are simply seeking out the densest energy sources on the planet to maintain their physical structure.
But because they share the lower atmosphere with us to feed, our human history is full of terrifying, inexplicable encounters. The sources suggest we've been misinterpreting these events for centuries. Let's talk about the physical danger here. You mentioned earlier that they aren't rigid.
Right.
Because they aren't solid, they can pass seamlessly through glass and solid metal.
And this is where the phenomenon becomes a very serious aviation safety issue. Plasmoids have been recorded passing directly through the hull of the MIR International Space Station and straight into commercial plane cockpits.
That is horrifying.
Imagine a highly charged, gigahertz radiating electromagnetic entity entering a confined space packed with delicate avionics. The results can be catastrophic. They cause massive electronic failures and totally jam radar systems. The paper actually hypothesizes that because of their propensity to collide and intersect, plasmoids might be responsible for many unexplained aircraft disasters.
If a pilot has a glowing orb of plasma phase right through the windshield and short out the control panels, that is a literal nightmare scenario.
Oh, absolutely.
And this isn't a modern phenomenon either. The sources explicitly connect this to the Foo Fighters of World War II.
Yes. Both Allied and Axis pilots reported being harassed by these glowing, fiery balls of light that would toy with their planes, pace them perfectly, and then shoot off at impossible speeds.
And we can look much further back than World War II, right? The paper re-examines famous historical UAP battles that were recorded over European cities. There was a massive event over Nuremberg in 1561, another over Basel in 1566, and Hamburg in 1697. Townspeople reported seeing blood-red and black spheres, crosses, and tubes fighting in the sky for hours.
Yeah, the old woodcuts of those events look exactly like an interstellar war happening in the clouds.
They do. So what were they actually seeing?
The sources provide a brilliant meteorological context for what was actually happening. These historical events almost always occurred during intense atmospheric temperature inversions.
How does an inversion cause a sky battle?
So a temperature inversion happens when a layer of warm air traps cooler air below it. The boundary line between those two air masses creates massive atmospheric sheets of static electricity.
Oh, the static charge again.
Exactly. This massive static charge drags thousands of plasmoids down from the upper atmosphere, pulling them into incredibly dense localized collisions. The plasmas were actively targeting, pursuing, and piercing each other in the lower atmosphere, drawn by the static charge. To an observer on the ground in 1561, it looked exactly like a war.
That is wild.
Yep.
It completely reframes historical mythology into atmospheric physics.
Hmm.
But there is another layer to these close encounters that is arguably much scarier, and that is the psychological impact on humans.
Right, the radiation.
Because standing near one of these entities doesn't just fry your electronics, it literally fries your brain.
It does. The human brain and our entire nervous system relies on very delicate electrochemical signals to function. Proximity to a large plasmoid exposes a human being to intense electromagnetic radiation, specifically in the 1 to 3 and 8 to 12 gigahertz ranges.
How does gigahertz radiation actually affect the brain mechanically? Like, what does it do?
It profoundly disrupts the synaptic firing in the brain's temporal lobes. It induces immediate neurological chaos. People exposed to these specific microwave frequencies experience severe confusion, dissociative states, and completely lose their sense of time passing.
So being right next to a pulsating UAP is literally like standing inside a giant running microwave oven. It completely scrambles your neurological hard drive.
And it induces incredibly vivid hallucinations. The implications of this are staggering. The sources argue that this electromagnetic brain disruption is likely the true root cause of many alien abduction nightmares.
Oh, wow. Think about it. You're driving down a dark road, a plasmoid descends to feed on the energy of your car's alternator. The electromagnetic field paralyzes your nervous system. You hallucinate terrifying figures due to the temporal lobe disruption, and you experience hours of missing time.
Exactly.
Later, your brain tries to make sense of the profound trauma, and you interpret those scrambled, terrifying memories as being abducted by little gray aliens and taken onto a ship.
Your brain was essentially hit with a localized EMP. There was no metal ship and there were no biological aliens, just an interaction with a highly radioactive life form.
Which brings us to the final and really the most profound question of this whole deep dive, the sentience question. We've established they exhibit lifelike behaviors, they move with purpose, they hunt for energy, they reproduce. But how smart are they? Are we looking at actual conscious intelligence?
To answer that, the sources bring in modern intelligence perspectives. The YouTube channel, The Fifth Pillar of Emphasis, highlights testimony from whistleblower David Grush during his congressional hearings.
Oh, right, the hearings.
When he was asked about non-human intelligence, he explicitly mentioned a continuum of life. And he specifically brought up sentient plasmoid life as something the government is tracking.
There was also a quote from former CIA Director John Brennan. He was asked about UAPs and was clearly struggling to describe the phenomena, but he hinted at something that constitutes a different form of life. It sounds like the highest levels of the intelligence community are grappling with exactly what this scientific paper is proposing.
They absolutely are, and the Journal of Modern Physics paper actually tries to quantify their intelligence. They suggest the awareness might range from the highly coordinated, collective hive mind of an insect colony all the way up to canine-level awareness.
But, let me push back on this a little bit, because I struggle with the sentience label.
Okay, why is that?
Well, my Roomba actively hunts for dirt around my house.
Uh-huh.
It navigates obstacles, and when its energy is critically low, it retreats to its charging station to feed. It mimics biological needs perfectly. But it's not conscious. It's just executing a script following the path of least resistance. How do we know these plasmoids aren't just the universe's natural Roombas following magnetic gradients to a nuclear plant?
It is a phenomenal question, and the difference between a plasmoid and a Roomba lies in the capacity for novel problem-solving and communication. A Roomba doesn't coordinate complex, multi-agent ambushes. It doesn't mutate its physical architecture to solve a problem it has never encountered before.
That's true.
And the NASA footage shows plasmoids communicating through light pulsation stroboscopic signaling.
Stroboscopic, you mean like they're flashing Morse code at each other?
Yes, exactly. Using specific rhythmic flashes of light and oscillating their physical size to communicate intent to other plasmoids. Furthermore, inside these massive macro-level plasmas, scientists have identified smaller, highly organized glowing orbs that act remarkably like ganglia.
Ganglia, like nerve clusters.
Exactly. Primitive neural networks that process information. It's the ultimate problem of defining consciousness, really. Our definition of life is entirely carbon-centric because humans, animals, and plants are the only models we have.
Right, that's all we know.
But the universe is not obligated to conform to our biological biases. If an entity has a nervous system equivalent, if it communicates via light pulses, if it makes coordinated decisions based on complex environmental stimuli, at what point do we stop calling it a complex chemical reaction and start calling it alive?
That implies that alien life might be so genuinely alien that we haven't even had the vocabulary to describe it until right now. We've been staring at the sky looking for riveted metal spaceships and biological bipeds, completely ignoring the massive flocks of glowing conscious energy right in front of us.
It requires a fundamental reset of our scientific expectations. We really have to learn to recognize life that doesn't share our physical architecture.
Well, this has been an absolute paradigm-shattering journey. Let's summarize the ground we've covered today. We started with microscopic, charged dust in a lab, self-organizing and acting like dividing biological cells. We scaled that up to the thermosphere, looking at massive, shape-shifting plasma orbs traveling at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. We followed them as they descended into thunderstorms and ocean whitewater to hunt for energy. We explored why they swarm nuclear weapons facilities in crop circles, and how their intense microwave radiation can pass through solid jetliners, jam radar, and completely alter human brain chemistry, giving rise to centuries of abduction myths.
It is a massive amount of data to process. But the profound value here is that you, the listener, now have a radically different scientific lens through which to view the universe.
Exactly.
The next time you look up at a severe thunderstorm or hear a news report about a UAP sighting over a military base, you don't have to jump to Hollywood science fiction. You have a grounded, physics-based framework to understand the incredible mechanisms of what might actually be happening.
It's not a metal ship from another galaxy. It's a hungry plasmoid from our own ionosphere, looking for a snack. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought. We established at the very beginning that 99% of the observable universe is made of plasma.
99%.
If the data in these sources is right, if this plasma naturally self-organizes into conscious, lifelike entities capable of seeding the cosmos, then it completely flips the script on our place in the hierarchy of existence. What if carbon-based biological life like us is actually the bizarre, fragile, rare exception? What if conscious, energy-hungry plasmoids are actually the universe's standard operating system? Next time you look up at the night sky, just remember, you might be the weird one.